Hi, good evening. I'm Catherine Tate. I'm the Executive Director of the School of Animation and Visual Effects here at AAU, and I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Pavani Rao. Just finished work on James Cameron's Avatar, The Way of Water. She's a visual effects supervisor, and she was involved in the underwater sequence in Alita Battle Angel, and has contributed to the development of the water pipeline at Weta. That's a big deal. She was a CG supervisor on Flight of Passage Avatar, a 3D flying simulator ride for Disney's Animal Kingdom Park, and won a Visual Effects Society Award for Outstanding Visual Effects. She's led the team in designing a pipeline to deliver every aspect of the ride's fully immersive Pandora environment, created in stereo at 10K 60 frames per second. You can imagine the render times for that. She joined Weta as a lighting technical director on Avatar in 2009. She was lead lighting technical director on Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and CG supervisor on the Hobbit trilogy. She has an architectural background and led the team in building and later damaging the post-apocalyptic CG world in Maze Runner's The Scorched Trials in 2015. She began her visual effects career at Rhythm and Hues in Los Angeles, and she is, I might want to mention, she also contributed look development to Academy Award winning The Golden Compass. She's also an alumna of Academy of Art with an MFA, and I am thrilled to have her here. We're going to ask some questions, and she's going to talk a little bit about her experiences, and then I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions from the attendees about anything you want to know, so that she's willing to tell you. So here we go.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. That was quite an introduction. I am very excited. This is my first time interacting with the whole, the group at the Academy of Art University.
Since you graduated, yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you graduated in 2003, was it?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I mean,
okay.
it kind of overlapped because I started working, when I was finishing up my thesis, but yeah, that's around that
that's
time.
always good news. So, so I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and how you how your path led you to visual effects and animation, starting at the Academy of Art, but just talk a little bit about how your roots and what made you decide to get into visual effects.
So I grew up in New Delhi in India. And as a kid, it's not like I knew any architects or I had exposure to architecture, but I was always really fascinated with fine art and architecture. Like my dad would buy me all these architectural magazines, and I would be fascinated looking at, elevations and plans. I didn't know anything about what it was, but I was just fascinated. And it was almost natural that I wanted to study architecture, and I studied at the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi. And it's there, I think the second year, we started using 3D Studio Max to visualize our own designs. It was part of the coursework that you had to learn the software so you could visualize your own designs. And there was a spark of something there. Like, I really like this process of creating these things on a computer. And I think that's where that spark really started from. And the course itself, there's a lot of foundational stuff that I think it instilled in me long before I made the transition to visual effects. Is the course was 50-50, very technical stuff. You're learning about physics, and you're learning about math, and you're learning about software and how to do things scientifically. But then half of it is just the creative process of how do you design, what's good design, how do you interact with the client. A lot of focus on collaborative projects. And there was a lot of projects where you had to get together, and you're talking about, a couple of 18-year-old architectural students, and everyone thinks they're the world's next best architect, but it teaches you the foundations of working together, collaboration, critique. And then as I got towards the end of the course, I was pretty sure that I wanted to do a master's and get into visual effects. But I was also really interested in not just the direct path to, okay, how do I get a job? And this is what I really like, but also photography. I really wanted to learn about shooting blue screen, learning about cameras, color theory. And I was looking at a few schools, and it's because of all of these reasons, the Academy of Art was my first choice, is because I was looking for uh, a, a university that has many disciplines. It's not just a visual effects university. I was really keen that it had fine art, it had film, it had architecture, it had a lot of different things. And as a master's student, I could actually take classes. I would take art theory, I would take a photography class. I had friends in the film school who would invite me on set, and I learned things on set. And that was my transition from architecture into visual effects. And at the academy, I did a lot of courses. I did a lot of foundation courses, even conceptual physics. But right from that first day, I knew I really loved CG lighting, that photorealistic lighting. That was always something that was very attractive. I did a lot of courses, but I knew this is it. And I think I had maybe like a year left of my thesis. So maybe I was a year in, and I saw this ad on the notice board at the Academy of Art, and it said that Rhythm and Hue Studios in Los Angeles was looking for fresh graduates. And they had this program where they would fly you out, they would pay for you, you would go down there for 4 weeks. They would teach you the software, they would give you a few test shots. And if you actually did well and you succeeded, you'd get a full-time job. You'd get like a year's contract. Now, the problem is I wasn't actually a fresh graduate. I wasn't even a graduate, I was still. So I thought, you know what, what's the harm? This is a really cool opportunity. And I had some stuff for my thesis that I'd been working on. I'd shot this very ambitious short film in India, and I was doing the visual effects. And I just put stills together of a lot of it was classwork. I took some of the lighting I did with Jeremy Byrne and just did a portfolio, and they invited me. So I ended up going to LA. I'd never been to LA before, and I stayed there for 4 weeks, and I got a job. And then my student advisor and the head of department, Lawrence Livingston at that time, they helped me figure out how I was going to work full time in Los Angeles, but then somehow finish my thesis. But I managed to do it. I had some remote classes. I had some director studies in Los Angeles. And then, so that was my, daytime professional VFX, nighttime starving art school student mode. And then, and really the interesting thing I found in those days is there's so many similarities. Like, we don't think about it when we're actually in school. There's so many similarities to when you're studying and when you're working in a studio. Both involve discipline, deadlines, being organized, and no one is standing behind you reminding you to do things. You just have to stay on top of it yourself. The only real difference is, for my thesis, it's my vision, it's my story. So it's my creation, and I can do whatever I want in it. But when you're working in a studio, you have to put the hat of the director and say, what's the story here? What is the story this director is trying to tell? But really, if you think about it, they're not that far off, those two lives. It's just, obviously, you're getting paid in one, so that's a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. You have to learn first, but then it's great when you get that first credit, and your first paycheck is a big deal.
Yeah.
What are things that you faced? I'm actually going to have the trailer shown in just a second for Avatar, but yeah. I'm going to first say, what are the things you faced when? Well, let's start with school. When you're at the academy, when you're at the Academy of Art, you got a job. That's fantastic. What, in terms of communication and collaboration while in school, how important is that?
Oh, it is a must. That is key to working in the visual effects industry, because visual effects is not solo effort. There's no glory. If you see that credit roll, there's never a movie you see one name come up. It's hundreds and thousands of people. And I think the foundations have to be laid in when you're studying and training for it. And it was like that at the academy. I remember taking, so it was a group of us, and obviously you know Dan Cox and Jason Fleming and my partner Satya, and like there was 5 or 6 of us, and we were just in the same classes and really similar interests. And I remember Tad Leckman, who was an instructor at that time at the academy, he said, you know what, you guys are always hanging out in the labs the whole time, and you're working together. Why don't you make a proposal to the academy to say that you want to do a short film as a class, and that will teach you all about teamwork and collaboration and play in your strengths. So we actually ended up doing a class which was a short film class. So we went out on we went on outside to the beach. We shot stuff in the marine. So we learned about shooting with live cameras on, and then we did some blue screen photography. Then between the group, we all managed to somehow, without conflict, play on our strengths to say, okay, this person, why don't you do this? This is okay, why don't you do this? Or why don't you do this? And that went on for a whole semester. And Tad was there leading us along and teaching us. It wasn't like, he was basically letting us figure it out himself, but just be there as a guide. And that was such a cool thing, because that there's so many lessons to be learned there. It's even when we made that demo reel for that class, the fact that you don't just strip your shot out of there and say, this is my shot. You say, I worked on a short film and these are the 9 or 10 people I worked with. That gets you into that mindset of this is teamwork.
Yeah, it really is a collaborative industry for sure. And when you went into that first job at Rhythm and Hues, what were the challenges you faced? And can you tell us a little bit about the first job out of school?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, the hardest thing was San Francisco. I love San Francisco. I love living there. I love the whole pedestrian. You can walk everywhere. You take the train. And to be honest, it was a little bit unnerving to move to Los Angeles, where no one walks anywhere. That was the first, I guess, roadblock, is you need to figure out how to drive. But the studio because they have this program, and they had this system of getting a lot of fresh graduates out of colleges. They seem to have a structure around it to help people with the challenges everyone is going to face. So the moment I started, they assigned me 2 people who were supposed to be mentors, right? They taught me, they were like, oh, let's take you out to lunch, show you all the good spots. Hey, here's a street you can get parking on between 3 and 7, all the little tricks about the studio. But what was really cool as time went on is the mentors and also the other experienced people at the studio, that's where all of my challenges were being resolved, is by asking questions. Is you're stuck, you don't know everything, you're trying to learn, and you will learn faster if you ask the right questions. And they had a really good system where they used to say, if you're working on something and you're stuck, you have 20 minutes to spend on it yourself. After 20 minutes, turn to the person on your left side. They get to spend 20 minutes with you. If they haven't figured it out, then you say, oh, I need my lighting lead, or I need my soup. And I think that just makes you quite disciplined about learning from people around you, because we're all facing the same things. Getting into the industry the first time is just, it's hard, getting into production and deadlines, and you need to prove yourself and make sure you get your contract negotiated. So I think the studio support was key to just making it through.
Wow. And I'm about to, let's go ahead, Will, and show the trailer for Avatar. I want to ask you, as after we watch it, we'll watch it now.
I know you think I'm crazy.
Never mind those big rocks.
But I feel her. I hear her heartbeat. She's so close.
So what does her heartbeat sound like?
Mighty.
We cannot let you bring your war here.
Outcast.
That's all they see.
I see you.
The way of water connects all things. Before your birth and after your death.
This is our home!
I need you with me. And I need you to be strong. Strong heart.
Fantastic. So when you got the word that you were hired at Weta, like, how'd you feel, and how did you start there and go all the way across the world to New Zealand? Tell us a little bit about the beginning part when you found out that you were offered a job there and as a technical director.
Yeah. So I moved to New Zealand in 2009 to work on the first Avatar film. And I remember coming here, being super excited. And I actually remember sitting in my first day, sitting in dailies at the back and watching this one sequence with all the biolume and all the lights. And I thought, I've never worked on a movie this beautiful before. And the experience of working for that year on Avatar, it just made me a total Pandora nerd, because I worked on Avatar and then I was like, I'm going to work on every Avatar project Weta gets. But it was another 8 years before they got another Avatar project, which was the Flight of Passage. I worked on that as well. And then it was a gradual transition. So I first worked on, we knew we had to do all this water tech for Way of Water. We knew we had to do all of this stuff. And it was years of, we knew we had a long time before production started. So what I did is there was a very small team of people led by Julia Terry and myself, and just R&D, hair simulation artists. And what we did is we did this underwater sequence in Battle Angel Alita. And the idea was, it was a very small number of shots, but we could take some of our tech for hair simulation rendering and we could apply it in a small set of shots. And as you know, the producer for that film was James Cameron and John Landau. So it was a bit of a test for us to say, hey, we've done something. This is a quick early sneak peek at what the technology is going to take us through. And that was quite successful. I think I finished on Friday on Alita Battle Angel. On Monday, I started on Way of Water. And that's been 5 years. So first 2 years on Way of Water, along with another visual effects supervisor, Chris White, I supervised the Water Task Force. So the Water Task Force was basically a group of experts, and it makes it sound really cool. Water Task Force. I love that name. At some point, people were calling it different things. I stick with Water Task Force. It was basically experts from different departments, and the whole intention was that in 2 years we have to anticipate and set up the technology and the workflow for 2,225 shots. The idea would be that when production started, you needed first iterations of almost everything to look real and pretty good. And then further iterations would be for either director notes or improvements or some changes. But you really needed that grounding to be really good. And the whole philosophy for the Water Task Force was, if you've seen The Way of Water, it really feels like a documentary, right? Like there was a crew that went down to Pandora and they shot this documentary, they brought it back and we're seeing it. And that was the whole idea behind it, is everything is grounded in reality. Every single thing has got some correlation to something that exists on Earth. And that's where all of the effort went into those 2 years. Is we want to do a fire. Okay, let's study a bonfire first. We want to do a plant. Let's study real plants. So everything you see in that movie is grounded absolutely in reality. So that idea of working on pure fantasy, that we didn't actually do that. It's everything has got some sort of an equivalent. And then once that Water Task Force, the work finished, I slowly transitioned into short production the last 3 years. And in the trailer where you see the Sully family come in over the seawall and they enter the lagoon. So my team's work started with that shot. And we did about 500 shots inside the lagoon. So all the underwater shots, the skim wing riding, the elu, the funeral sequence. So there's all of those sequences that are set inside the lagoon, even the ones where they come in and set some of the marui on fire. That's the work that my team did. So we were Team Metaina.
Wow. I mean, that is, and we all know that water is so complicated physics wise. And can you tell us some of the tools that you used to create? And you mentioned reference, that everything had an equivalent reference to it. And that's something that we always try to make sure people do here, is always start with a reference, because, you know, life is very complicated, and, you know, it's really, you can't just think that you'll be able to create something out of memory. And so that's a really amazing part of the process of the pipeline. So did you, when I say pipeline, did you use Maya and Nuke, and did you use Unreal at all for any of the shots? And how were you able to accomplish so many shots in such a short period of time? I know it doesn't seem like a short period of time, but we're talking 500 shots.
Yeah,
that are
absolutely.
fully CG, absolutely complicated with water sims and stuff. So tell us a little bit about it, about the pipeline.
Yeah. So I'll start with the reference in reality, because that's really where all the pipeline and the tools come from. Is it could be as simple as, I'll just give an example where in that one shot we were looking at where you come over the seawall, we shot footage, these drone footage on the west coast of New Zealand, where you have these massive waves that are hitting against the rocks, and we would run simulations. So you're trying to find a specific wall of rock on the south coast. You can say, okay, this is the same size as the seawall, and apply enough pre-roll and set up all. And then something as simple as the ecran fly over, you see these little pools, and there's water sort of flowing over the edges. And I remember being in a gym call, and we're asking Jim, what is it? What is this water? Like, where is this water coming from? And he was talking, and he said, there's some gaps in the seawall. And as soon as a big wave crashes against the seawall, what happens on the inside is that the water gets pushed up. And he said, it's basically the equivalent of water overflowing from a small kiddie pool when you put a hose in it. So that's what we did. We found a little kiddie pool, and we put a garden hose in it, and we had the water overflow. And we said, is this what you mean, Jim? And he said, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. And we wrote a tool that basically runs a simulation to match that. So all of that work that went into, so Loki, which is our proprietary simulation system, all of it was based on running test shots. So part of the work of the Water Task Force was everything has a reference and a test shot. So you start really, really small. So you say, okay, I'm just going to have a sphere falling into water. What is it supposed to look like? Match it. Then you go one step bigger. Then you go one step bigger. The idea is that all of the solvers and the simulation tools at Weta are all physics-based. So because they're physics-based, they scale. So if you manage to get a sphere falling in water looking right and matching a piece of reference, that sphere can be 10 kilometers wide and it'll still look correct. So wow. Loki was so that's the whole idea, is reference is really important. This is something that Joe Letteri has established at the studio since he's worked there, is every time you present anything in the studio, no matter who's going to see it, you always have a picture in picture. So when you see that first shot of the kids jumping in the water, that artist who was working on it, he never presented a version of his simulation for the bubbles or for the water without a reference. Now, the reference was a couple. So we had reference that was shot in the tank from the performance capture. So you can see a lot of bubbles and you can see some water activity in that. Then Jim had actually gone down to the Bahamas and he shot a whole bunch of reference, hours and hours and hours. And we found one piece that also had two people diving into the water. And this is how we would present internally. This is how we would critique it, approve it. And when we would present it to Jim, we'd say, okay, Jim, here's the shot, here's the simulation, here's the bubbles. And here is two references that it matches to. And it also made this approval process much easier. So having a reference is really important before you go off, off the side.
Wow, I've never, so presenting the reference always with the shot so that you can compare the physics to reality.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it can be something really simple too. Like we had this massive sequence where we had fires. So Quaritch and his posse come in and they're threatening the villagers and they set the village on fire. And those things that are burning, they're massive. They're about 10 floors high buildings. They're huge. So the progression of reaching the point of setting a 10-floor building on fire started with a candle. We basically filmed a candle and all of us standing around a candle to see, okay, the Navi actually have darker skin tones. So how does firelight look on different skin tones?
Oh,
And if you can get the physics of that right with 4 humans of different skin tones around a candle, then you can go bonfire, a bit larger, 10-floor building. So the scale is really important. This also means you're not wasting time. Like if you were to tell an artist, just set that building on fire, it would drive that person crazy and also waste so much energy and time. Instead, start on the thing that's easy to iterate on and simpler to do. And once the tech is proved on that, then you can make the progression.
it's brilliant. And the fact that you're shooting reference for most of the shots, normally you might look at other films or look at like real life stuff already existing, but the fact that it's part of the pipeline to shoot the reference, I love that because you're comparing it to reality, and it's the same, that you're matching something that is the same, and it's not completely different, even though like if you just use a waterfall or if you just use something online, it's not going to be the same when you're actually shooting it, customizing it to be simulated.
Catherine, I can't tell you, in the last 5 years, I haven't been able to take a single holiday without actually taking pictures of water. Like I hope now that the movie is done, like my husband will be standing there waiting to get a picture taken, and I'm instead photographing some small ripple on the side of the water.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I saw the first movie, I was so impressed with the beauty, like you were saying, how beautiful it was. I mean, to be able to work on something for so many years, that's just complete art, just beautiful art and stylized, but also you're using reality as a reference. So, so exciting. And would you say that the tools that you used were fairly consistent, or would you be using different tools for different shots, like say Unreal or real-time stuff?
They were fairly consistent. So the bones of even the stuff that we use that's not proprietary at Weta, there is a lot of things we write. There's a lot of plugins and really custom things we write. But all of the effect solvers, they're all pretty much Weta proprietary. Then we use Katana for lighting. We used Nuke is our compositing tool. And animation, most of the tools are all proprietary, but it's standard. So once we established it at the start of the last 3 years of production, they were improving and finessing because we knew that the complexity and the shot number would increase towards the end. So the focus was on, okay, we have this tool now. Right now, it's really slow. It can only support 100 shots, but we need in 6 months for it to be able to support 1,000 shots. But we stayed consistent to that tool set.
Is it difficult working and with the standards that you have, and then maybe a lot of the work is farmed out to other studios? And how do you feel about that part of it? Like just doing a portion, and of course you're getting all the sexy shots, but do you think that the way that's for large feature films nowadays, that's a norm? Do you think that's positive or negative, or so that you could focus on the stuff that you really do well, and but sometimes the quality might vary? What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's the reality. That's the truth. It's the reality is multi-vendor shows now, and that is how the future is going to go, especially with remote work and artist pools. It just makes sense. Also, I find that, just not even talking about Way of Water, just in the general sense, there's studios that are experts at certain things. So that's to be taken into consideration as well. Now, I haven't worked on that many multi-vendor shows, but I think when you do, it's part of that collaboration and teamwork. That other studio is also part of this film. So we're all part of the same thing, trying to deliver a movie. So I don't think I've ever felt like this stuff is ours, this stuff is theirs. Especially when you've been on the show for such a long time. It's the other supervisors were there when we were watching the movie, and we just all enjoyed it together.
Do you ever get overwhelmed with the scope and complexity of the type of work that you're doing? I mean, water is one of the most difficult things to work with, whether it's live action or CG. Did you get intimidated sometimes about the scope of the work and the amount of people involved, and it all like somehow is going to have to work?
When we started the Water Task Force, that's exactly how it felt. Because I think if you tell any visual effects artist that they have to do 2,225 water shots, they're going to pass out. So that was there. And I remember Chris White and we had this whiteboard in his office, and we were very early days starting to write down strategies for, okay, we had so many things to solve and so many projects that we were trying to find an organization to, okay, how do we slot these things? And we would keep running out of space on that whiteboard. But as time went past, and obviously we had really good project managers and people whose job it is, it started to feel like we were solving the problem a bit at a time. And that's what helped. Is that whole 2 years, it was a very structured process. It was writing down everything, talking to Jim, making sure we got an example of, this is before turnover, by the way, we didn't actually have any shots, of looking at art, getting a really good idea, getting the experts in, not the visual effects artists, the project managers, the people who figure out how long software cycles, right? The researchers, the scientists. And then it was like a mini movie. The whole project was like we delivered a film, except there were no images, they were just test shots.
It takes so much organization to move into something so complex, and it's very interesting to hear how you manage that.
And I like that segmented focus too. Like every morning you have stand-ups, and all you do is you say, okay, what is the focus for today? We're going to look at a cup, a sphere, a tumbler. But if you say we're going to look at the whole kitchen sink, that would be really overwhelming.
Right. What would you say was, if you could actually say what your biggest challenge was during this film, the biggest difficulty, the thing that you thought might make the whole thing fall apart? Did you ever feel that way?
I didn't feel that way. I feel like there was enough of a support structure. Like I felt like I was supported. If I was ever feeling like there wasn't enough time, or I wasn't feeling too good, I had a support structure I could lean on. I had my team, I had my colleagues, I had Joe Lettieri, and everyone has worked together for so long that we were all really close. But the thing, I think, because of the duration of this film, what I think is actually the most important thing is teaching people how to manage themselves to last a marathon. This is not a sprint. And a lot of us have if you worked in visual effects industry, it doesn't matter what studio, a lot of us have done a lot of short shows. This idea of you get in, you ramp up really quickly, then you take some time off, you come back. The idea that this isn't a quick ramp up, I would have to tell people, go home now, we got another year. The idea of you have to space yourself, look at your targets for the day, and also keeping people motivated, right? You have to stay excited. You have to still look at the images and say, I'm still excited. There's still 2 more years to go. And that, I think, was actually the thing that I focused on, is help keep my team motivated and stay interested and positive, and also help them, sort of make it through the marathon for the sprint at the end.
It is a long marathon for sure. Yeah. And sometimes it can be difficult to see an end to it, and it must be so rewarding when you actually go to the film and see it, and you can all sit back and just enjoy the beautiful work that you've done, and how much, a big part of your lives it actually was for several years. It's amazing. How is Weta dealing with after the pandemic, the the remote working, would you say that WETA is back on campus, or would you say that there are a lot of people working from home? What's the new reality for WETA?
It's mixed. So I think the policy is talk to your department managers and figure out. Now we have hubs, and I would in Melbourne we have a hub in Vancouver, and there's obviously the offices that we have in Wellington. I found because Way of Water, a big portion of it was during the pandemic, and New Zealand was in lockdown for a lot longer. We only came out of lockdown, I think, in the last 1.5 years or the last 1 year. Is the crew was 50-50 in Wellington for working from home and 50% at work. I went in occasionally. I work from home. So I would go in for screenings, or I would go in to see stuff on a big screen. Stone State Studios, where Jim shoots, is also just 5 minutes from where I am. The thing that felt it's a bit unusual compared to other places is Wellington is a really small city. It's only 400,000 people, and the suburb I live in is only 10,000 people. So the people you're working with, even though they're remote, most of them stay nearby, which means you cannot go to get a haircut or buy toilet paper without running into someone from work. So that, I think, that connection that everyone has at WETA through community events, the fact that it's a small city, it's a bit different because you feel like you know those people you're working with. You have lots of opportunities to meet even people you have never met before who you're working remotely with. So it's mixed. So there's people who prefer working from home and they sort of work it out, and it depends on the project whether there's permissions or not. And then there's people who like coming in, and it's kind of up to those shows to figure out how they crew up.
But it's not stopping. You think the remote working is going to continue?
I certainly hope so. I think there's advantages for, it's not for everyone. Like there's many people who really like going in, but I'll just speak from personal experiences. I love it, and it has there's so many advantages that work from home has for me personally that I sure hope it continues.
Well, I would imagine that you can't walk down the hallway at WETA without getting questions and getting pulled away from the task that you're trying to do, where sometimes you can manage your time better at home.
Absolutely. I find the biggest advantage is work-life balance. Just something as simple as when I'm at home, even though it is pretty packed and the schedule is really, really busy, I can take out 5 minutes to do some weird, awkward stretches with my tennis ball against the wall, which I cannot do at work without someone laughing at me. It's just those little things that help for me. I can go for a walk. I made a promise to myself when we went into lockdown and we started work from home that I would sit down and calculate all the time it takes for me to commute to work, park my car, pack a lunch, make the lunch so I can pack it in the morning, not see my partner the whole day, and I would do something healthy with it for my own self. And now what I do now is I use all of that time to go for a morning run, have a proper breakfast instead of a granola bar while driving. And I just find that healthy balance actually makes me more productive at work too.
Yeah, it's so important because to move. I always tell my students to move because, and sometimes when you walk away or sleep on it, then the answers come to you rather than just burning yourself out.
Absolutely. It's funny you say that. I don't know if Shruti Dikshit is in this call, but she and I were just exchanging. Shruti is my friend from School of Planning and Architecture.
I think I saw her in the chat.
So she's a faculty member, and she actually reminded me about the story of when we were studying in college. I often would tell her that there would be some design problem. We had to design a house for someone, and there would be something that I just couldn't get it. I would spend the whole day, weeks have gone past. And then I would go to sleep and I would wake up and it's like the puzzle has sort of, I can see it all. And I would just get up and sketch the design out. And that would be by submission. And she reminded me about the story, but apparently it's scientific that people's minds process problems in their sleep, and you do arrive. So a good night's sleep is actually going to make it more productive for you at work.
That's great advice, everybody out there. I know a lot of people have been losing sleep, right after before midterms. So you know, pace
Don't lose sleep. Your midterms are going to go better if you get some more sleep.
yourself. So in terms of the next 5 to 10 years, what trends do you see? Things like AI is like getting a lot of press and you know, and it's used in so many different ways that it almost becomes like a generic term. But machine-based learning, and do you see that that's going to be a huge, do you think that that's going to be a big deal in the next few years? And also anything else that you think might be a trend coming up that we're not aware of, that we wouldn't be aware of?
I think work from home, that's kind of the big thing the pandemic has shown us, right? And I really hope better work-life balance that work from home brings to the industry in general. Multi-vendor shows, because the moment you say work from home and you have all these hubs and people can, it just makes the world a smaller place. And I think that's better for
Yeah.
all of us. And definitely, I think with machine-based learning, where I see this trend going is it's not like we're not going to have jobs to do. What it's going to do is all of the components of our job that are drudgery, that are just really manual work, and it's not something we particularly enjoy either. I think those components, if something can do that for us and say, okay, you take the bits that need your eyes and your mind and your creativity and your problem solving skills, then that actually could be quite efficient way of working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I want to leave plenty of time for our students to ask questions. So first, one more thing I want to ask you for my last question for you. What is your updated dream? Like now that you've accomplished so much and you're a visual effects supervisor, what's next for you?
My updated dream and my resolution for this year is to focus on myself. So I want to travel because our borders have been closed in New Zealand for the last couple of years. So we haven't actually been able to leave the country. So this year, my partner and I, we're actually traveling. We're traveling around New Zealand. We're going to Scandinavia later this year. I want to spend as much time outdoors as possible. So my entire focus this year is, and this is really important because it's been such a long show that this is the time for me to decompress.
That's a great way. I actually think that sounds fantastic, because then you can be out there in the world. And I know that you'll be looking at the world with a very, very keen eye and applying it to your work in the future. So thank you so much for talking with me. And I just really want to give the students now a chance to ask you some questions. So I'm going to pop off for a bit, and I'll stop. And if we can just showcase Pavani as the main speaker, and then Will, and we can have Will there. Actually, I'll just turn my camera off.
Yeah, I'm going to leave mine off just so we can. But yeah, we have a few good questions, and you made me think of some questions too. But this is the first one that came up is, did you have an opportunity to work with the production designer, Dylan Cole, or really any of the concept artists? And if so, what's it like collaborating with the concept art and art department on this project?
Oh, absolutely. So we work really closely. So it's a bit of a loop. So we have the production designers, Ben and Dylan, and we also have Deb, who's the costume designer. And we have an internal VFX art department as well, which is Michael Smale. So every asset in the film, it can be a quarrel, it can be a spaceship, it can be a piece of clothing. It is a very close collaboration between the production designers, the costume designer, the Weta assets department, the art department, and the visual effects supervisors and the teams involved, because there is all of these things have to be kind of nudged and finessed a little bit in all of these places before it looks good. So an example to give is Deborah, who's the costume designer. She's amazing. She's extremely talented. Like the kind of stuff she's designed and the number of things she's designed in this film, it's unbelievable. She has put an effort on every bead on the piece of clothing. So what happens is when she designs something, she'll usually go down to a workshop and she'll shoot reference video. She'll say, okay, this is how the fabric moves. This is how this is how it reacts to wind or water. But then that part is all stuff that we can shoot. Then the assets department makes the textures, everything matches the artwork, you evaluate it. Then you take these costumes and you put it on a character and you put them underwater. And underwater, depending on how deep it is and how murky it is and how far from the camera it is, you lose reds really quickly. So if there was a costume that was designed that had red as a theme and it looked a specific way without water, the moment you have a character wearing that costume and they enter water, to be physically correct, you would have to lose some red. And this is where that collaboration comes in. So we would often do this with costumes. We build something really small. We would have the lighting TD take it, light it, composite it, and loop back with Deb and say, okay, here's a halfway point. What do we want to do? Maybe we want to just back off on some red. Or if you really want it to be red, we have to put in more red so that when the red gets removed by the water, you're still left. So this is a very, very collaborative process working with the Light Storm production designers and the art department and the teams at Weta.
That's really cool because we were just in the class that I brought in here, we were just talking about color in film and how it varies in situations. And that's a really interesting one, that water, obviously, yeah, it makes everything more blue.
Yeah.
I like, this is a great question from Sydney, because I think it's going to parallel so many things with your story. She says, I am actually an architecture student switching to animation and visual effects. What are the most important programs and topics to focus on? I absolutely love The Hobbit and Avatar. My goal is to get an internship at Weta in the future. So happy to be here.
Oh, that's really exciting. You know, I highly recommend Sydney to look up the Rookies, because I believe the Rookies is an organization that does international internships. And we've had a few of them at Weta FX, and it's a really, really cool set of people that I've seen. So that's a recommendation. And then depending on your interests, I find that with visual effects studios, especially the larger studios, there's a focus on specialists who still have a foundation in like a generalist foundation. So what you're passionate about. So if you're really interested in lighting, then for example, I was really interested in lighting, and I took, you might think it's a random class, but it was the most useful class. I took conceptual physics at the Academy of Art. And that conceptual physics class was all about color theory. It was about how colors mix. Why is water blue? Why are clouds blue? And it was very, very fundamental class. And I still think about it in my day-to-day job is color theory. That's such a fundamental thing to know. Photography, for example. Yes, you know, we all use digital cameras, but knowing cameras, knowing about f-stops, it's very important because the language in which you communicate to directors is still very film-based. And that's how critique is at studios too. So for example, if I'm giving notes on the lighting of a shot or the comp of a shot, we always talk in f-stops. So I'll say, take it down half a stop, bring it up 2 stops, take down that left ear by 2 stops. And it's important to know what visually that feels like, and you'll know it if you just take a manual camera and take a photograph.
Yes, definitely engage with all kinds of different art and arts medium and style.
Yeah.
Cassie says the weird question, but I don't think this is a weird question, especially considering we're talking about work-life balance. Were there any major adjustments you had to make when moving away from family and friends? How did you embrace that the change while creating that work-life balance?
I think though I don't think I've had a work-life balance in my whole career. My work-life balance has significantly improved with work from home. That is the major changing point for me, because I think I've always attempted to. I seem to have, I don't know if everyone has it, but I seem to have an off button for work. So when I'm at work, I'm at work. If I clock out, I walk away, I will forget about it. And the city that I live in, Wellington, there's a lot of hills and mountains and beaches, and everything is only 5 minutes away. So it's very easy to immerse yourself in nature. And I find that to be my ticket to just forgetting about work and just getting out of there and going for a walk. But with working from home, what I'm able to manage a bit better is time lost in commute. I can multitask a lot better. I'm highly efficient, so I don't have to wait around. And even though I value water cooler conversations and chit chats in the kitchen, there are days when I just want to go to my desk and get work done. And I find that that aspect means I can leave in the evening half an hour earlier and go for a run.
With the moving and changing cities, I think that's very common, not just for our students who are international, but for the whole industry. What are some tips you have for people?
Absolutely. Now, when I moved to LA, as I was mentioning to Catherine, it was so overwhelming. That was actually the most overwhelming part about getting a job. It wasn't the job itself. It was just being surrounded by cars, and I didn't really know anyone in LA. And thankfully, my partner Satya, who's also moved with me, but both of us were overwhelmed. And what we found is the kindness of all the people who were working at the studio I was at, Rhythm and Hues. There were so many people who made friends with me and took me out for lunch or showed me the ropes or just welcomed me into their community. So this idea of the visual effects community, right? We say visual effects community. And I personally think the visual effects community is not the organization. That is also one of it. But let's look at community at the most simplest level, right? So your community is the people you work with. So if they welcome you, you're going to feel at home. And that's your support structure. You're not feeling well, or you're tired, or you just need to vent, or you need someone to look over your shoulder. You've got to embrace, and that first part of that community is made in college. All of you students who are in class, this is your community. When you start working, you're going to run into so many people from the academy.
Yeah, networking and collaboration. We can't tell them all the time. It's so important. It's vital.
Yeah, and I think building genuine relationships too, right? Like, networking is great, but don't network for the sake of it. Like, just build relationships with people that are based on collaboration, like you said. So people will think, oh, this person is really easy to work with. I really had a good time working with them, and that's it. If they ever need to recommend you, they're going to give you 5 stars.
That's a great point. Because they'll just think, oh, that's the cool person. This is a real behind the scenes making of kind of question, but we won't get any kind of proprietary avatar information. But when you have a production like that, that's so many years, how did the visual effects budget for that long production process?
How is it managed?
Yeah, how do they even budget for that?
I think because we always knew it will take that long, because it's 5 years is just the time that VFX has spent on it. The actual Lightstorm part of the work started, it never stopped. In 2009, when Avatar was released, the first film, the work continued. So Lightstorm and Jim and John, the production designers, they have been working on this project since 2009. So you have very clever producers like John Lando and Weta. We have Lena Scanlon and Nikki. And the producers, this is their job, is they know exactly how long it's going to take, where do they put the money, the budget for all the R&D. So they're really, really good at their work. And this was not a surprise. So when the project is this long, there's a big focus on, like I said, how many, this is a marathon. We're not expecting people to work long hours. You really got to focus on, it's a long project. It's not the same as the 3-month stint you just did.
So yeah, taking that big long view, may take some of the pressure off for sure. I have a question, and anyone else, please post your questions in the chat. But I had a question of my own, because you mentioned that you worked on the ride and the other, getting into as many of these Pandora projects as you can. It sounds like from the first movie to the second movie, obviously the difficulty ramped way up with the water.
Yeah.
Like way up. But now that you have created all these digital physics, you have a lot of these assets. When you take that world of Pandora from one film or project to another, does having those or carrying those, does that save time or does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we have the tool sets, it's all doable much faster. So as an example, I don't know if you remember, but from the first Avatar, there's this sequence in the movie where Jake is riding his Lenoptrix and he goes out to the other tribes on the outer, and he says, oh, let's all ride. And there's this shot of crashing waves against this cliff face, and you have all these ikran with riders flying in. Now, I worked on that sequence, and it took months to render it, months to render like 4 shots or something. It was incredibly slow, incredibly slow. Now, a shot like that, we could probably sim it in a couple of days and render it in a day. So definitely the technology has come a long way. And that also is why this movie is being made in this time, is because we needed the technology to be able to tell the story.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, I can't wait to see some of these other ones that are coming out. This is, we knew we were going to get a question like this. Is awesome. Question is, I've been a lifelong fan of Lord of the Rings. Working on future projects with Weta would be very fulfilling. As an international student, what is the gateway to getting into a place like Weta as opposed to other studios? What does Weta look for?
So I'm actually going for a conference next week where there's a lot of focus on recruitment. So my knowledge is very fresh on this. Is the thing that's being recommended is, if you're a student and you're keen to work at Weta, register your interest on the website. And even though, so there's obviously 3 hubs, there's one in Melbourne, there's one in Vancouver, and there's one in New Zealand. And each of those countries will have its own specific visa processes, some minimum work experience to be able to get a visa. But the good thing that Weta does is, even if you're a student and you say, I want to work at Weta, I'm registering now, you can update your online profile with Weta as you gain experience, and they will maintain it and they will reach out to you. So I would highly encourage, if you're graduating now, you're looking for a job, is register your interest, because Weta is always looking, and the department that takes care of the young talent that's coming in, they're really keen to hear from everyone.
So you heard it, everybody. get involved. So Gianna asked this is great, and some very awesome praise for the scenes and close-ups of riding the sea creatures, the water looking very realistic. So that's true. I think we all agree that stuff, just really, documentary is the right word for it. Just kind of blew our minds. But she asked, because you were talking about the process for getting reference and then doing those water shots, that pipeline, was that the same for all of the shots with characters interacting with the water, or were there kind of like slightly different pipelines depending on the shot?
All the same pipeline, and everything, the basis was ground yourself in reality. We had tons of reference footage. So we had stuff that there was a massive tank at Lightstorm in Manhattan Beach, and there was a lot of stuff that was shot there, high speed, multiple camera angles of people jumping into water. So we had tons of reference from there. We had reference from the performance shoot. We had reference that Jim had gone down to Bahamas and he'd shot a lot of stuff there. And because we have water in Wellington everywhere, we can just go out and shoot something quick. So reference was the key. The pipeline was always the same. And because of the physics-based, actually all of our stuff is physics-based, the scale just automatically happens. Like in our renderer, small light, 10 small lights, it just all multiplies like it would in nature. So as long as we were able to get a real thing, match it, we were able to scale quite easily.
It's 8, but we have one more question at least. So if you're good to keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a really good question too. What were the challenges for working on this project specifically in 48 frames per second instead of the common frame rates?
It's just more images on disk. It's more images on disk to composite. But other than that, it didn't really make a difference. It's more in the rendering process. We basically, all our sims were running 48 anyway, and it's seamless. What it did mean is we had a lot of data on disk. Our data footprint was ginormous.
Are you allowed to say how big it is, or do you know?
I had some stats. If you if you give me a second, I might look it up, because I remember that there was something. Do you have a second?
Oh yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic amount of very highly realistic images with water at 48 frames per second. I can't imagine the storage and processing that would be
It
required.
was
Yeah.
huge. It was really, really big. Let's see. Okay,
I'm going to
so
pop in and
found
ask a
it.
question actually quickly. When you said it, because I'm just so interested in what you're saying, how all the physics scales, is that specifically to Weta tools, or is that a normal thing?
It's specific to Weta tools. So all of our solvers and our renderers are physics based, which is why everything just scales as it's expected to. So I found the numbers, Will, for you, 18.5 petabytes.
Wow.
And
Wow.
just to put this in perspective, we were about 2 months away from delivery on Avatar 1, on the first film. And they gave us some swag. They came in and they gave us these sort of these tags with a chain. And it was because we had just hit 1 petabyte. So in 2009, hitting 1 petabyte on Avatar was considered a big deal. We hit 18.5, we didn't even blink.
You're over an order of magnitude higher. Yeah.
Wow.
Between that makes it, I wonder how big it's going to be for the next one and the next one. Let's see. Are there any other questions in the chat? Otherwise, we can. Oh, based on the number of things you learned as a student in school, how many things do you think you've learned since being in the field, learning on the job, right? Comparatively.
Every day. This is how I describe it. You know how people say learning curve? It sounds really nice. I call them like motorcycle ramps. You know those ramps that stunt motorcycles go on? And if you don't kind of go at the right angle or the right speed, then you crash. Every day feels like that. You just have to be like, okay, I'm going to learn something new. I learned it. Great. I'm going to make the leap and I'm going to land. And so it's a learning experience. And that's what's fascinating about this work, right? That's why we're all in this. We're all passionate people who want to get into visual effects, is because no two projects, no 2 days are going to be exactly the same. Like every day is going to be interesting. And I know that the people who are watching this, I know you're all like the rest of the industry. We all thrive on challenging work and we thrive on problem solving and creativity. And every day is like that. I worked on this project for 5 years and it didn't feel like, oh, it's the same old. Never.
Well, that makes the second part of their question all the harder. They want to know if there was one thing that, in particular, of the things you've learned in your career, are there a few things you could say that are like the biggest things you've learned since leaving school?
I think the most important thing to learn is the director's vision. You really have to think about visual effects is not a show and tell. It's not something that the movie is not a showcase of visual effects. It's a tool for storytelling. And that's key. Storytelling is the key. So you have to, when you're working on something, it could be a simulation, it could be a comp, it could be lighting, it could be anything. You have to get your mind out of, hey, what do I want in my movie, to what is the story? What is happening here? What's the dialogue? What would look appropriate here? And I think that's the biggest thing you learn when you start working, is because when you're students and we're all working on our own projects, we have this creative freedom, and certainly exercise it, enjoy it. I think that's where it's an opportunity. And the creativity doesn't stop. You just have to think about the story that's being told on the project you're working on. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned since leaving, is you have to wear the director's hat.
And we always hear too about every project how, especially now that you can realize pretty much anything in visual effects and animation, it's always goes to the story, right? The story has to be there, and then everything has to serve that story. That's such good advice.
Yeah, and I think, I know we're, when I went to see The Way of Water for the first time, I was laughing, I was crying, I ate my entire bucket of popcorn when something really emotional came up. But it was a great movie. Like the entire 2.5 hours, I was not thinking about the fact. I was like, okay, this is Jake and this is Neteri, and we're watching a movie. And that's what movies are about. It's about the story.
Definitely is a big popcorn movie for sure, with all the action and suspense and everything. Yeah.
What are you working on now? Are you working on the next one? Or?
Yes, we have already started working on the next one. But it's starting stages, so it's a time to sort of go out and look at nature for new references before it gets all too immersive again.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time that you spent with us and your generosity of knowledge that you've imparted on and shared with the students and myself. And I just am so glad that that you spent time with us. And I also want to mention that you're on our advisory board. So we're really thrilled to be meeting with you soon about how we can improve our curriculum in our school. So thank you so much. This has been so interesting, exciting, and I'm in awe of your talent. And I'm sure the students are just thrilled to have been able to be in the same place and hear your thoughts about the industry and about art and about especially the fact that you're the sum of its parts is bigger than the separate parts, that we really are helping a director tell a story, and a film takes a village, and those villages are all over the world, several villages, and it's just this huge collaborative process that it's just so hard to believe that it actually works.
You said it so well, Catherine. Like that's it. That's the key. And this is such a pleasure. I know that it's always really exciting to be in the middle of students who are excited and passionate. And, this is such an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll be talking to you soon. I just want to give a special thank you to Scott and our online video team, to Becky Johnson, who is basically the behind the scenes, puts all this stuff together and gets it all ready to go. Will Ziegler here, who helping manage the chat and helping ask questions and doing and managing the video and all that. We really appreciate everybody's help. And until next time, from Industry Guts, I bid you farewell and have a wonderful night.
Thank you. I'll see you at Seagrass, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. If you're going, I haven't been for a while, so maybe I will go. And then say hi to Joe Lettieri. I worked with him at ILM many years ago, and he was a very talented lighting supervisor when I worked there with him. And it's been so wonderful to see how far he's gone too. And so WETA is a great place. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.